Hey everybody, welcome back to the Callas ADV Legends series. I've got one of my absolute favorite players, longtime friend, and somebody that I've always enjoyed watching play this tier. ADV Legend, and I guess these days, what else? DPP, Black White Legend, OU Legend, Marco P. Dude, thanks for coming on. You're not the easiest guy to track down. I super duper appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks for inviting me. I've been thinking about ADV a lot more ever since I got invited to Gym Invitational. Kind of brought me out of retirement. I wanted to play that because I had a little more free time. But yeah, no, ADV is in a really good place right now. It's a really cool tier. A lot of people doing cool things, and of course, a lot of that comes back to you. And I'm happy to talk with you about this, man.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I'm sure the viewers would love to hear your thoughts given your resume, which we are going to get into in just a moment. But for those watching who are not familiar with Marco, can't imagine that's too many, but maybe a younger player, newer player, could you just give us a brief intro as to who you are?
Yeah. So my name is Marco. My last name starts with a P. Um, I'm from New York. I live here. I work in education, and I'm 24. So I guess for Pokemon players, 80 for Pokemon players, that's pretty. That's probably well above the median. But for ADV players, I'm on the younger side.
For sure.
Um, yeah. Yeah. That's about it. I think I've been playing Pokemon for what, about 10 years now. Competitive. I played growing up, or I played it growing up. And then in middle school, there was like a very transitional phase where it wasn't cool to play Pokemon, and then it became cool again to play Pokemon. And then I was just like, I really like playing Pokemon, so I think I'm gonna try to play it more. And then I got into PS, I think in late 2014, 2015, started playing Draft League. At that time, XY was the current, or it might have been Oris. XY or Oris started playing Draft Leagues. I was like 14. And then I remember I was like feuding with like grown men at the time. My first of many feuds with grown men in like a Skype group, and they kicked me out of like the draft league because I was like shit talking one of the guys. And then I was like, oh shit, let me join Smogon because this seems like the best place to play against other people, and it seems like a lot of players, you know, gravitate towards maybe being more competitive and aren't really trying to be casual. And I've always, I didn't grow up on the internet. Like I wasn't playing Mons or I wasn't on Smogon from the time I was like 10 or 12. Um, so I guess that's a good thing. But in high school and later in college and then later as a young adult, working professional, whatever, just like find treating Pokemon as like a hobby, keeping it at arm's length, but then knowing when to really embrace it has been it's been really awesome. And I think that's like one of the best parts about this as a hobby is you can really enjoy it playing 1 hour a week, or you can really enjoy it playing 20, 30 hours a week. And I think you can also be very you can be very passively engaged with it, right? You can just be on Discord or watching games or doing stuff like that, or you can be playing in 10 tournaments at once, preparing for all of them and doing all of that. And I've always liked that about Pokemon. I've always liked the people. Um, Met some really great people. Like, I had someone visit me last year um, from another country and stay at my apartment, which was ridiculous. And
Someone that you met from Pokemon originally.
yeah, someone I met from Mons, and I've like hung out with people from Mons, and I guess like I have a longtime girlfriend now. I've got longtime friends, and I've known people on this site longer than I've known basically any of those people, which is just ridiculous to think about. But it's yeah, I think also Pokemon is interesting because compared to how big of a franchise it is, it's Smogon is such a small internet community, and I think that's where it separates itself. Or I don't know. I'm not a part of any other internet communities, but that's where I think it separates itself from maybe bigger games like League of Legends, or I guess that's too big, but something that might be medium sized. I don't know what a medium sized game would be,
You're
but everyone really knows everyone. What?
you're super right. It's I can provide a fun fact now that you mentioned that for you and for the viewers. Pokemon is actually the number one biggest media franchise in the world. I know people would think, oh, Mario or all these other things that are popular. It's not. It's literally Pokemon. And you're right. Smogon and just the competitive scene as a whole is such a drop in the bucket compared to the wider tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of people worldwide who love Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think that hmm, the inference for getting into Smogon is very low, but then to be a really good player and what a lot of people want these days, or what a lot of people have wanted to want or desired over at least my career has been to be a well respected player, or at least well respected enough to play like top tier tournaments, or good enough to play top tier tournaments, whether it be getting drafted or qualifying. That's not like impossible to do. A lot of people break into that every day, but it's not easy to do by any means. Like you have to have a brain, right? Which is that's saying a lot, at least for Americans. I don't know about other countries, but
Now you mentioned
it's
Pokemon Showdown earlier. Did you miss out on Pokemon Online? Was that just a smidge before you?
yeah, that was a little before me. I think I yeah, that was a little before me. So I never had to deal with PO. Um, Obviously, I'm sure basically everyone else you're interviewing is probably speaking very highly of Pokemon Online, but for better or worse, I never had to deal with it. I think from what I've seen, the interface looks pretty horrible. Um, but a lot of people really loved it, and it had some features I think that separated it, and maybe even made it better than the PS team builder at the time. It had sort of a cult following, but I never really got into Pokemon Online. Um, I'm sure I can. Well, I'm sure you can tell me about that, but I'm like PDC or someone can tell me
Oh,
more than
yeah.
about PO.
We all have a different starting point. PO was the first simulator for me, but I mean, you mentioned the other people. I've talked to people who started on Shoddy, started on Net Battle. Pokemon's been around a long time. So for you, you mentioned you were in middle school at the time, and you were kind of weird about it, right? Because you said that Pokemon was uncool. I remember back in the day, you were kind of closeted about it, right? You didn't. A lot of your friends didn't know that you played.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I think it was hard, man. I think I was in high school. I was early in high school, and you're young in high school. Uh, it's it's kind of weird seeing or thinking about being like that reserved about this now, because I work in education. I work for a school district. I design tests, so I don't really work firsthand with the kids, but I see a lot of the stuff that the kids are into, and they have anime backpacks, and they're talking about anime with the teachers and some of the staff, and they're just very very open about what they're into, and I'm really happy to see that, because oh yeah, early 2010s, you had to be so closeted about liking anything if you wanted to, not be called a fucking nerd, which yeah, I
But
guess.
but looking back, if you were in high school today, or if you had whatever a son, a brother in high school, the recommendation that you would give is just be open about it. It's no big deal. It's cool. I love Pokemon.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's how I am now. I'm pretty open about it as a hobby. I don't tell people right off the bat that
Well,
you know
no, it's not what you
blah
lead
blah
with when
blah.
you meet a person. Hi, I'm Marco. I
Yeah,
love Pokemon.
that's pretty. No, no, no. More about the just being a quote unquote competitive player. I don't
Sure.
tell people yeah, that, but
A lot of people aren't gonna
I'm more than
really
happy to tell
understand
people
what that
about
even means, right?
yeah, most people will have no clue what that means. It's it is like trying to explain like the concept of gravity to a mouse. Like
No, I can relate to this
people,
seriously. Like when I used to tell people when I was on the Magic Pro Tour, it's the same thing. People would, oh, I used to play that game. I'm like, no, 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 I play professional. Well, what do you mean? Like you go to tournaments? Well, yeah, but like for tens of thousands of. What do you mean? Like, eh, no
yeah,
concept. Don't even bother. I
yeah,
just try to whatever they think it is. It is.
yeah, and like, and that's fine. Like it's, there's a reason it's not a conventional thing, or even if it is like a conventional thing, there's a reason that like it's hard to get into. There's a reason it's a hobby, you know? And I think, yeah, a lot of people kind of have predispositions towards a lot of
Absolutely.
this stuff,
Absolutely.
and which kind of sucks because, like, I don't know, I'm in young adulthood, and a lot of people around me, like, their hobbies consist of what? Like, drinking and trying to get pussy. Like, sure, like, that's fine, but like, you work, you drink, and then, like, you try to get laid, like, once, twice a week. Like, that's your entire life. And, like, I'm glad, I'm blessed, I guess, just to have many things, and Pokemon being one of them, like outside of that. Not to like rag on anyone that, that's their only interest, but I think there is like a crisis of leisure and hobby in America. And I think a lot of that has to do with like our work culture, not to get too political or anything, but our work culture and like just our general perception of like stuff like Pokemon or Magic the Gathering or anime as very, very childish. But then, I guess to counter that point, there's a lot of people making lots and lots of money making content on social media for Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, anime, and making careers out of it, right? Or even working for companies like the Pokemon Company or Crunchyroll or
I agree
I
with the
don't know.
sentiment though. I mean, I'm a decade older than you, and I still for sure when I meet a new coworker or whatever, and they start asking, "Oh, what are you into?" I play video games. I collect video games. Like sometimes I get the look like, aren't you a little old for video games?" I still get that sometimes, and
Yeah,
I don't care what people think. That's fine. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. But I agree with you that there is still kind of a little bit of a stigma around being a certain age and participating in these hobbies. And we will later in this talk. I'll ask you about that and what you think needs to happen to grow the scene and to grow Smogon. But before we get to all that, why don't we start at the beginning? What comes to your mind when I ask you about some of your favorite memories from the early days of your career, competitively?
yeah. I think the three things right off the top of my head that come to mind were grinding, and two of them are kind of combined into one. Grinding Pokemon Perfect and like Smogon tournaments to kind of get my name out there, and grinding friendlies versus whatever player would play me because I really just wanted to get more experience and get my name out there. And if someone thought I was decent enough to play, maybe they think I was decent enough to like draft for a tournament, or and then if I was decent enough to get drafted for a tournament, maybe I get my chance to like play versus some better players and show my name out there. And then ultimately, like, uh, I'd be able to play in bigger tournaments. And yeah, that's kind of what I wanted. Is I wanted to play against the best people because I wanted myself to be one of the best. I think one of my most fond memories that I find hilarious to this day and that I look back on is PPL 1, Pokemon Perfect, or it might have been Pokemon Perfect League 2, where I was on, I think it was Team Ghost. Was it Team Ghost? Yeah, it was Team Ghost with like contacting and like Fodgy, and I was playing DPP. Um, I beat Night Fox. I was really proud of that. But then we ultimately didn't make the playoffs, and I remember your Team Dragon losing to Team Fire, led by the cheating and dastardly PDC, who was using his alt, the Killing Moon. I remember being in their Discord chat and just going crazy. And that was kind of my first experience with like the camaraderie that comes along with Pokemon. And that was so fun to me and really, really cool. And just getting that glimpse into people bonding over something so silly, or yeah, so silly and inconsequential, but also like so important and strategic. It was really cool to me, and I really like that. Um, hmm,
Oh, me
I
too.
think yeah, I'm sure you have a
Great
very
memory.
different. I'm sure you have a very different view of that time, but I also really liked coming up on Pokemon Perfect and um back in the day, I guess this must have been what 2016 to 2018. For some reason, everyone, and by everyone I mean not everyone, but a lot of the top ADV players and RBY players would play basically. I don't want to say every Pokemon Perfect tour, but they play most Pokemon Perfect tours. Um, I guess people grow older and have more obligations and whatnot, but a lot of people played in these tours. You'd see like Linear versus Astas, like a round two matchup. I know that's like one of the most regarded games of all time. Is one of their Pokemon Perfect sets. That was really good. But yeah, you'd see like BKC versus UD in like the first round because they were small, like 64-person tours, but they had so many good people. And I always did pretty well in those. I'd always be like a semifinalist or a finalist. I think it took me a while to win one. Um, but I'd always beat some good players or dominate some average players. I remember H Clat was coming up at a similar time to me. He's kind of a guy that I came up alongside. He might have been a few years after me, like maybe a year or two. So I was a little ahead of the curve, or a little ahead of him. And I remember being a little more established than him. And obviously now, like, we've both spent lots of our lives playing this game. And I guess we're both respected players. But back then I was a little more clouded than him, if you want to call it that. And I remember him like getting lucky versus me, and I was just incessantly whining, and that was really funny. That's something I used to do a lot. I also liked that a lot. I liked complaining and getting angry at the game. Um, I really did. Like I genuinely enjoyed that. But then back to what I was saying about coming up with guys like HClat, I really liked the sense of community in early ADV, or like the smaller sense of community among kind of like the new kids on the block. I guess it was me, Linear, the guys who were coming up in like 2016 to 2017, 2018. It would have been like me, Linear. Cowboy Dan was a little more established, but he was kind of making a name for himself. Uh, Star is another one that comes off the top of the head. H Clat. Can you think of anyone else that was
You
becoming good
well,
at this time?
UD kind of gets an asterisk, right? Because he's my age. He's
Yeah,
an old player. He was playing a million years ago, but then he was gone for years and then returned to the scene around that time.
yeah. UD's another guy, but like I said, like you said, there's an asterisk there. Um, hmm. Um, Jesus, I'm sure. I wish I could go back and look at like my Discord messages and see like the people I was asking for games back then. But yeah, no, like those are the five or so guys that stick out to me that I'd be playing basically every week, um, to try to get better at, or try to get better at Mons. And watching us guys kind of grow and become better than, or quote unquote better, perceived as better or more successful, or and become rise to prominence over like Dexay and Veteran in Love and Golden Sun was kind of really satisfying because it was really intimidating coming into ADV for the first time. And you heard it was the Smogon tier. It was like its principal tier. Like all the best players would play ADV, and that was kind of what attracted me towards it. It's like, yeah, ADV slots were always the most expensive in SPL, or ADV slots were always in the Tribaker. They were always they held the most weight because your ADV player was like kind of your captain or your leader, and that drew me to ADV. But along with that, came the idea of, hey, you're coming into ADV, you're going to have to play Vil. You're coming in ADV, you're going to have to play Golden Sun, Ojama, McMegan, Dexe, Undisputed, BKC, all these Jabba, all these huge names that these guys have been playing. Tomahome, Danilo, so many people, fakes that are still playing to this day, which is ridiculous. And they were already so established when I was coming up, however many years ago, which is awesome to see. But yeah, no, it was cool to see the new kids on the block kind of take over and push those guys out a little bit. Even like Triangles was always around ADV, but he kind of his like prime kind of overlaps with mine, quote unquote prime. Um, when he was at his best, and he was like really, really incredible at his best, and so creative and effective, and really wasted nothing. And the team builder in the game was a really smart player. Um, Even he was like kind of outer circle ADV guy, but then transitioned to like a really inner circle ADV guy, and then won Callas Invitational, did well in all these tournaments. Just watching the dynamics of the ADV community change, and then continuing to watch that happen as I've like exited the ADV community, not even exited, or as I've distanced myself from like being one to one with it, has been that's always been one of my favorite parts about Pokemon, and I guess ADV specifically, because that's the tier that I associate with the most. Um, Early career. What else did I like? I like building a lot. I've always liked building. Um,
Oh, believe me,
I took
later on I'm going to ask you about that building process.
yeah, I took pride in like using things that other people didn't use. Um, whether it be ideas or sets or teams or just even Pokemon, like mons that people would not think to use. I just thought it was really cool. Like, hey, this metagame's been around for what, 15 years at
As of,
that point.
I was going to say, as of today, it's over 20 years old.
Yeah, it was probably like 15 years, 14, 13 years, whatever, in like 2016. Uh, Something like that. It
Oh,
was
I can tell you,
more than a decade old.
it's one of my trivia bot questions. So ADV came out in Japan in 2002 and then 2003 in North America.
Okay. And I guess the rest talk mechanics really kind of put a hamper in everything, but I think that's overstated. I don't know. The old heads would
Yeah, you'd get some pushback from the older guys.
fucking cry about that, but like, yeah, I'm sorry, like you can't play without rest talk Zapdos. Like, cool. I don't know. That really, yeah, no, they treated it like it was a completely different game, like, and as if calling, post rest talk ADV and pre rest talk ADV, like even comparing the two, it was like sacrilegious, and that shit always bothered me. Um, there was like there was always an air of like gatekeeping around old gens, and I hope that's become better. I don't know. Yeah, I hope that's become better. I know Jimothy's doing a lot. Him being a big YouTuber, and I guess being like a ADV player probably has done a lot for old gens. And BKC I know is doing some good work, and even yourself, you probably brought what countless people closer to Pokemon ADV, made it a little less intimidating. Yeah, I think, and that's just like a greater Smogon issue is our our miraculous ability to like push people away and then also complain about like site growth. Um, but it's a hard game, so it's definitely not for the faint of heart, or at least it wasn't at one point. See, now I'm sounding like an old man because Nowadays, like, yeah,
Kids these
you
days.
used to be able to like complain in battle chats, and yeah, you used to be able to complain and like roast people and just be like a foul human in battle chats. And now, like, you get muted for doing something like that. Your passion is yeah, they've eroded a lot of the passion in Pokemon, and by they I mean like mods. So now I sound like an absolute fucking boomer, but like, I don't know. I think it's important to like really just let out at someone on the internet every once in a while. As ridiculous as that sounds, I think that's like essential to a healthy existence. At least like have some sort of release. And if that's like letting out at someone on the internet, then so be it. That's not the worst thing in the world.
So you mentioned Pokemon Perfect and early tournaments, but probably what you're most well known for, at least among my audience, is your consistent, sustained success in SPL. You were one of the very best ADVers in SPL of all time. You have a really, really high win rate, and you were playing in that golden era against the top guys, many of whom you mentioned earlier. What do you most attribute that success to? I mean, anybody can have a good season, maybe even two good seasons, but you did it over such a long period of time. How did you not only achieve it to begin with, but how did you keep yourself motivated after you go 6-3, you go 7-2? SPL sucks. It's a grind. It takes 3 months. It's a ton of work. It's a ton of pressure. It's a ton of effort. How do you get yourself in that mindset to grind it out and care and put in effort and get those results year after year? And if I've got a young guy watching this right now who looks up to you and wants to do the same thing, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think you have to want it. Like as I said earlier, Pokemon is very much a game that where your results are dictated by your effort, and if that means like testing and building with teammates and thinking about your game when you're at work or at school, that's what it was for me, you know? And, I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where I could do that. I was in college and high school, or yeah, I was in college and high school for for all of my ADV career. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to kind of just have the time to prepare, have the time to know what was good. I think just have confidence in your own building. That's the most important thing. Don't be afraid to take risks in the team builder. Just because people aren't using something doesn't mean it's bad. Um, it's like people dictate the metagame. The metagame doesn't. It's not like a dynamic force. Like, yeah. So if you find or if you believe in something, if you believe that Fortress and Blissey and Suicune and just fat mons that do nothing are going to be good, they might be good, right? Don't let someone tell you that they're not going to be good just because they're passive or just because a lot of people are using Snorlax or just because Starmie's very popular, right? I mean, you just got to have confidence in yourself. You got to know your opponents too. I think that's really important. Not what they use, but more how they play, because that also like dictates. Yeah, that directs like what people use more than people would think, especially in ADV, like where small turns and gaining a small advantage every single turn and getting up an extra spike or getting a little 12% damage by blocking a spin on a Will-O-Wisp or getting a toxic off and then switching out and sacrificing them onto spikes or trapping something with pursuit to get a little extra chip so it's in range of two ice beams like rest Zapdos or something, right? It's those small turns that make all the difference. So just being really focused and on top of your opponent and being able to anticipate their moves and having kind of that sixth sense when you need to have it, but also, having the bandwidth to understand that there's a like greater game plan and not straying away from that game plan is very important. Like I can think of so many games that I've played that were decided by like one or two turns, and I just happened to pull a trigger, and the guy I was playing like just guessed wrong or made a turn or made a move, and I guessed it right. Um, yeah, and that's the thing about Pokemon is you just have to be willing to trust yourself. Because if you don't trust yourself, you're literally never going to win in this game, which kind of sucks. Like I know it's hard to be confident about yourself in a community that does its best to, at times, take that confidence out of you or demean you in every way possible. But yeah, you just got to believe, it sounds corny, but you got to think that you're the man. Like you got to go into every game thinking that you can't lose. Like I've gone into games before thinking I'm gonna like get my ass kicked, or not even thinking I'm gonna get my ass kicked, just being like, okay, my head's not all ear to this game. I really don't. I didn't really prepare that much this week. I kind of just copied a team, and I'm not super confident in my team. And then I've ended up getting my ass kicked because I didn't pull a trigger, or because I didn't play well, or because my team wasn't good. But if you really go in there like confident and focused, then I think you can win because Pokemon's a pretty simple game. You just gotta have a good understanding of what's good and have a good understanding of how your opponent plays, at least in ADV, and you'll be fine. Um, yeah, you'll be all right. I think also playing a lot is important, right? Pokemon's not a game where you're just magically gonna, there's no innate talent in Pokemon, or maybe there is. I'm sure some form of intelligence is correlated or better correlated to success. There's a lot of smart guys in Smoke. A lot of these guys are like engineers and software engineers, uh, lawyers. A lot of these guys have very, very prestigious jobs. So I guess maybe that might be something, but you just have to play a lot to get a good understanding of the game. Once you have a good understanding of the game, of the fundamentals and the mechanics, and by mechanics I mean like the turn to turn machinations, then I guess you can kind of develop your own style, which is that's where you take yourself from kind of good to great. Is when you stop just taking what everyone else is doing and start trusting yourself as a player. That's what I really like.
You know what really
So
stands out to me?
yeah, what's that?
Well, you just gave me a really long answer. You just gave me a 3, 4, 5 minute answer. You talked about team building. You talked about confidence. You talked about the grind. You talked about studying your opponent. You mentioned all of that, but you know what you never mentioned, and you know what's always stood out to me about you?
What?
Motivation. You are never someone who's struggled with it. I talk to these other guys who have gone, oh, I had a lot going on in real life at the time. I was kind of down. I wasn't really motivated to play. I needed to take a break. I was in week 4 of SPL. I kind of regretted signing up. I've had all these interviews. That's just never been an issue for you, and that's why you're such a winner, I think. I mean, you've just
Yeah, never
never.
an SPL, dude. In SPL, I was fucking like, and I think that I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I think the reason for that is because in SPL, I knew every year I was going to Ray. I was going to the Tyrants, right? Until this last year. I knew I was just going to be with Ray and we were going to do our thing. And these were my like guys that I've known for a while. These were my dogs. Like he was retaining me. He was buying me again, putting his trust in me. Like I was going to be an asshole and like let him down. Like where I frankly like lost my motivation was like around the summertime or around Callas Invitational time until you pushed it back, thankfully. Um, that would be when I was kind of like dragging my feet a little bit and not like super excited to play Pokemon. But SPL, like, you have one game. Like, how little that's literally 20 minutes of your life, and it's going to dictate how you feel. And it's going to decide how you feel for the next like 2 days. For someone like me, at least, I'd be upset. There were certain times where I'd be upset about a game, like for so long. And yeah, SPL games I'd be upset about for so long. And then at some point, I think later in my life, probably around like my third or fourth SPL, I was able to let go of that and able to be like, okay, whatever. It's just a hobby. You shouldn't derive this much stress from a hobby because that's not good. Um, I think that's a big part of what demotivates people is that, yeah, it's like this shit can be stressful, man.
Letting it get to
You
them
know?
too much, letting the results of a game mean too much.
Yeah, man. Like everywhere, because yeah, and like I said, it's so pornographic how you can see everyone's reactions to what you're doing. Like Smog Tours chat is, yeah, that shit's like dystopian. You can see what everyone in real time. You can see everyone's thoughts on what you just did, and when you think about that, it's kind of like shit. I can't be bad again, or I'm just gonna get flamed again, and I don't want to like think about how bad I am or how I could have played differently. I want to feel good about myself. So I think the grind of Pokemon is what demotivates a lot of people. But that something like that to me is something that I always felt I had control over. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to be in school and not have a full time. I was only ever working part time.
I was going to ask you that
Um,
too. I mean, how much do you think timing was a factor of this? Like, if you were playing in your first SPL today or at age 30, do you think it would have been the same for you?
no, definitely not. Definitely, like my first SPL, I lost. I could have basically gone like 10-1. I only lost like one real game. I lost one game to guessing a turn wrong, or I lost two games to guessing a turn wrong, and I lost one game to getting lucked. Um, so I was just really locked in. I don't know. I don't think I could. I don't want to say I can't replicate that because I think I could because I think I'm way better now than was then. Like just as a player and smarter. But um, I was so locked in, and I had such a good read on the metagame, and I just knew what my opponents were going to use. Like I remember in that SPL finals, I woke up that Monday morning and I knew the guy was going to use baton pass, Yoga Fodex or whatever. I was like, yeah, he's going to use baton pass. Like I'm the best ADVer in this SPL. Like baton pass is kind of a hot pocket topic. He's got undisputed supporting him. I'm gonna bring Taunt DD and I'm gonna bring Roar Zapdos and Whirlwind Skarmory, and I'm gonna win. And that's what happened. I beat the guy with Taunt DD and Roar Zapdos, and he brought Baton Pass, which was that was really cool. Just like calling my opponents, but I guess it's kind of like an inverse scenario where now I have more experience, so maybe I wouldn't have to study as much and think about this stuff as much. Maybe I could make more of those raw call outs. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would be able to dedicate the time that I did in the past to Pokemon. Definitely not.
Your SPL record is outstanding, and like I said, one of the best ratios of all time in ADV and against top level competition. In Callas Invitational, however, your all-time record is 11 and 10, and then I don't know how you did in Gym Tour this year, but add that. But your best run was in CI5, where you got second place. Overall, what was your Callas Invitational experience? Like I said, 11-10, middling overall record in a very tough tournament. And then especially that second place run. What do you remember about that? Do you feel like you could have won that tour? And what were some of the standout moments in that second place finish?
Um, First of all, I don't think I could have won that tour. I was so burnt out of Pokemon by the time I was in winners finals. I was so fried, and I was like, I have to build 5 teams or think about my team choice 5 times versus fucking ABR, who's a robot. No, I can't beat this guy. And that's just like how I was going into it. And sure enough, I got my fucking ass kicked. That stands out to me is how badly I got decimated. I really like. I wish I could have taken more time in hindsight, and like this was a. I don't want to make excuses, but this was like a point in my life where all my friends were like well aware of like the stakes I was playing with, and they knew this was like a big money tournament. And then they saw me like playing a game, or they saw me like playing a set like on the couch in our living room. This was in college at the time, And they were like really upset with me. They were like, Marco, like you've been taking this so seriously, like up until now, like what's going on? And I was like kind of just pussyfooting it. But I wish I'd taken that more seriously because I had some really, really fun games and I was really, really motivated. I think UD, my first set versus UD, I remember UD was like grinding Mons a lot. I played pretty well that third game. I made some really nice reads. Versus Tama, the next round, I think. Versus Tama, I remember being like a heavy, heavy favorite in the predictions because like Blightbringer messaged me a screenshot of like the predictions and was like, "Look at you, man! Like getting predicted to beat Tamahome," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, nice." And I won that. Beating Star was nice. That's a guy who I've played so many times across so many different tours. It felt really good to finally, not finally, I had beaten him before, but beat him in ADV because a few months before he beat me in SPL finals and I played a horrible game and that was just so disheartening. Oh my god, that was horrible. Like I said, like I hated kind of letting down my friends in SPL. That's why I always put so much effort into it. And I'd done that in SPL finals. Granted, Star is an incredible player. He's someone who I'm gonna surely talk about again. But yeah, no, it's yeah, that was really good. Um, I'd say that was the moment that stuck out to me the most. I think this was a point where, like, prior to this, I'd taken a few months off, like after SPL, and I'd come back and I hadn't played ADV. So I had a really like fresh look at the metagame and I was motivated to play. So that felt really good. Um, and it was just good to have that motivation again, I think. Like that was the first time in a while where I was like, okay, I really want to play ADV because I'd been trying to like not play ADV. You know, I was always um like dancing around being an ADVer because I wanted to play other tiers. You know, in my head, like I'd felt like I'd mastered ADV. Uh, I'd felt like I'd done everything to prove to myself that I was the best, and I'd put so much effort into the tier. Not the best, but pretty good. I'd put so much effort into the tier, and I studied it so hard, and I played so many games and spent so many hours becoming good that I didn't really want to like play it anymore. You know, I was like, I kind of cracked the code there. I want to play some other tiers, but that Callas Invitational brought me back in to becoming or being really into ADV. That was awesome. Uh, that was kind of like my revival. That tour kind of revitalized me. So uh, that really stuck out. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier your take on building and that you've always not been afraid. That you actually made a point. You took pride in bringing weird things that nobody else did. And anyone who's followed your career, that's pretty evident. I mean, you've brought Omastar in SPL, Ursaring. I remember one year that I was managing and my ADV was Golden Sun. You brought Flareon against us in that matchup. I mean, you have not been afraid to bring weird stuff, even NU Pokemon sometimes, and you a lot of the time have managed to get wins with those. I mean, you got to take me through the mindset. You've got to take me through when you're building a team for the week for SPL and you're going through 10 different options. What if I do this? What if I do this? How does somebody end up settling on, you know what the best option is out of all these choices? I'm going to bring Omastar. I'm going to bring Flareon. How do you get there? When you sit down to build a team, what's the first thing you do? Do you start with the concept? Do you start with the opponent? What does the process look like for you?
I think it was just what it was just I just wanted to build a good team. That's where it started from. And I wanted to not be weak against what was good at the time. Like you say the let's take Omastar and or let's start with Ursaring, right? At this time, like one of the most popular things was like Claydol, uh melodic Claydol kind of stall teams. So I was like, okay, you know what actually really, really destroys these teams is like Swords Dance Ursaring. because nothing can kind of fulfill its role of being able to outspeed Melodic and avoid Claydol booms after an SD and just OHKO it. Whereas something like Snorlax will get boomed on, you'll have to switch out, take EQ with something else, maybe dance around it, and maybe use a more passive team. With Ursaring, you just trap Skarm and then start clicking buttons. And I was like, okay, so this is good in this matchup, but I might fall behind in some more offensive matchups. How do I support this? Throw some paralysis on this. Okay, now Ursaring goes from being like a one-trick pony to being something that can abuse paralysis. It's not completely useless in every matchup. It can sponge a hit versus like anything that it kind of needs to, and trade with a lot of things. And hey, like trading is good. I have DD Tar. And yeah, you kind of just in a tier where there's 20 Pokemon, you know what's good and what's not good, and you can kind of take advantage of that. Like Omastar is another one, right? I was playing Vil, and I was like, okay, Vil just uses these ridiculous.
Did I lose you there for a sec, Marco?
I'm sorry. Are you still with me?
Yes, I lost you for just a moment. The last thing I got was you were playing against VIL. Please continue.
Yeah. So Vil used like these ridiculous Calm Mind teams, and I remember him really only using Claydol as a spinner. I was like, what beats kind of Calm Mind offensive teams and puts pressure on like these fat Claydol spinner teams or these uh, fat teams that don't really have a good special wall? I was like, oh, let's use Rain. But I want to use Rain not just with Kingdra. I want to use Omastar because Omastar gets spikes. And having spikes and forcing in something like Melodic or a Blissey and then being able to click spikes and then having something like I had Snorlax and then Suicune in the back of that team. So if I ran into something, I could click spike one turn and then I could switch out to my Suicune or my Snorlax versus something that would sponge the Rain Mons just and keep momentum. I think a lot of these older players weren't really like I don't want to say they weren't privy to that concept, but they were fine just kind of switching around for a few turns if it meant that they weren't compromising their overall game plan. And I just like did not agree with that philosophy. I thought you should always have your foot on the gas if you had the opportunity to. And Omastar was kind of the manifestation of that at the time.
So for the
And also,
record, did you win these games, the Ursaring game and the Omastar game?
I did win both of those. The Omastar game, also Omastar Hydro Pump OHKO Zapdos, whereas Kingdra does not. That was like a big thing for me. Was that it was in rain, Hydro Pump killed Zapdos, and the other one did not. Kingdra. Uh, but yeah, I did win those games. I lost the Flareon game, but I was really proud of my team that game. I thought it was really good. And Golden Sun's a guy who always used his like Moltres stall. Great player. Loved his Moltres. Loved his Gengar. Loved his offensive spikes teams with like Jolteon. And I was like, okay, Flareon kind of like fucks these teams up. Even like Subcalmine Jirachi was really hot at this time. And I was like, okay, Subcalmine Jirachi, I'm a big stall player, right? I use a lot of fat teams. Uh, that's one of the things I'm known for is using a lot of fat teams. So this guy might use Subcalmine Jirachi because a lot of people are just throwing that on teams these days. So what, 2020, 2021, and expecting it to beat stall. Hey, I'm going to use Roar Flareon plus Doug Trio because that will handle every Jirachi that I play against. So it shouldn't be any problem.
So
Um,
let's get to the nuance. So like, okay, Roar Flareon. Why don't you just use Roar Arcanine, right? It's got better stats. It has Intimidate. Why Flareon?
yeah, well, Flareon had Wish and Protect, so it walled a lot of the mixed bonds. And even though it had like paltry physical defense, you matched it up. Or I had like Suicune on that team, and then I had like a Fizdef Jirachi. So I was able to like sponge all the hits that I needed to, and I had Claydol and having two Wish Passers was really awesome because even though I didn't have like a Swampert, like that dedicated physical wall, I had two Wish Passers, and I figured having two Wish Passers is effectively the same thing as having one dedicated physical wall and one wish passer, or having, a Flygon and a Jirachi. And yeah, I thought that was really unique. And unfortunately, that game I got pretty unlucky. I thought I should have won that game,
I believe
but something.
your Suicune got crit is the way that I remember that.
Yeah, my Suicune got crit. My Fortress got parried on an explosion turn. And I think one other thing happened, like my Jirachi got something happened. But I was really proud of that team overall. Another thing that I was really proud of that wasn't my idea. That was actually Roro's idea. That I like. He kind of posted it as a meme. It was like the Salicberry Cacturn. He was in our channel because he wasn't playing that SPL.
That's the Destiny
And he,
Bond Cacturn.
yeah, he posted that without Destiny Bond. He posted like Grass Whistle or something worse than that. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, I'm not going to use Grass Whistle, but I think I can find a way to make this more playable. And hey, Salicberry, you can EV it so that it outspeeds and Destiny bonds stuff like Zapdos and Mence, but you can also make it so that it scares out maybe a lead Swampert or a lead Suicune or a lead Tyranitar um, sometimes. But yeah, no, that was really fun. Even being able to like implement ideas like that, and I want to give a shout out to like um, guys like ABR and Ban Manaphy. I think have kind of taken this to the next level. Like some of the shit that Ban Manaphy uses is ridiculous. Like that has like that I didn't even think of using like Roselia. Like that never crossed my mind. But then seeing it be like a viable Pokemon was just hysterical to me. Um, but yeah, I think role compression is a big one. Like you look at a team and you're like, okay, what what are you missing on this team? What does this team still need? Hey, my team kind of needs a physical sponge, but it also needs something that can hit hard. Oh, I can use Metagross, but I don't want to be so weak to Moltres. Oh, let me use like Regirock. Maybe Regirock could be good here. And hey, Regirock also can boom, so I'm not completely like in the dark versus Waters or something like that. I think that's a good way to. You're thinking about it very. I don't want to use the word strategically because it's not that complicated, but you're thinking about it very causally, right? It's like a flow chart almost. And I think that's a really good way to think about team building. Um, I also was always very, very scared, and I'd always put like contingencies, or I'd try to put as many contingencies as possible on like those teams with ridiculous mons, because honestly, or obviously, using some of these mons would put you at like a disadvantage in some more conventional matchups. But then I remember teaming with like ABR and SPL, and he would completely ignore certain things while preparing, and that just was like so amazing to me. I don't know. I could never do that. And I guess playing or going into new gens as I've like transitioned into new gens, I've become better at that. Just being like, okay, if I play this thing, I'm gonna lose versus
Well,
it.
it's different
Which
because
is
in new gens
fine.
it's impossible to cover everything.
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
can't be done.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of had the stones to say like, hey, I'm fine being bad versus this if I'm good versus something else. But someone like ABR was a lot more uncompromising than I was, and that was really cool to see. Another I really liked my favorite team of all those teams is my Miltank team. I thought that was like the coolest team of all time. It had Charm Umbreon with Pursuit, Mono Milk Tank with Curse, and then like CB Mence and Dug Trio. I thought that team was awesome.
So again, why is it Miltank rather than just Curse Lax? What gets you to Miltank?
Yeah, so Miltank again, Blightbringer was someone who used like these really fat teams that couldn't really uh couldn't really pressure like a Curse Lax outside of using like a Dug Trio or maybe a Calm Mind Jirachi, and especially like Dug Trio uh and Miltank could kind of not get trapped by Doug Trio, and additionally could also use Heal Bell. And on that team, I had Suicune, and Suicune, benefits from Heal Bell. Umbreon benefits from Heal Bell. Umbreon can spread status with Synchronize, but also get Heal Bells by Miltank, making it like really hard to kill. Yeah, Heal Bell was really good on that team, and the combo of Curse, Milk Drink, and Body Slam with the double trappers to remove steel types and rock types and whatever also was really appealing to me, and it worked out that week. And I used it in like another tournament, and it worked out versus Ray Scarface, so that was pretty fun. I like that team a lot,
So speaking
and I thought Umbreon was always. I always thought Umbreon was like a really really underexplored mon. That's like something that Linear used a lot too.
so speaking more generally, not in the extreme examples, the Omastars, the Ursaring, the Flareons, just more general, where do you fall on the spectrum of building a good team just generically? I don't care what my opponent does. I just want to bring something that's good versus, I guess for lack of a better term, counter teaming or building a team specifically to beat that guy or with that guy's preferences in mind. You touched on that a little bit. Oh, Golden Sun like to bring this, so I brought Flareon. But what's the line for you? Are you closer to 50-50? Do you lean one way more than the other? What's the thought process on that?
Nah, I'm like 70-30. You got to bring a good team, like 80-20 even. Like, I think, like I said, I was always so paranoid of just losing to a random threat, or not a random threat, but a threat that, like, my opponent feasibly could bring, but probably wouldn't bring. And um, the Golden Sun game was kind of an extreme example because he's a player who never deviates from his style at all, or and always uses like the most conventional things, or he was. And
I was
I
building
thought I
behind him that year. I tried to get him to mix it up. I got a 6-3 out of him that year.
yeah, he's a good player. He's a good player, but he never really deviated from his swag, which is fine. But um, I just wanted to use a good team, and Flareon was one of the things that completed what I thought was a good team. Yeah, I thought it was a good team, but it didn't win, which was upsetting.
That doesn't mean it isn't a good team.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not a good team, but yeah, it was a good team, but Um, yeah, it just rolled the dice rolled out like that. You just got to bring something that you're confident in versus the metagame. Like some SPLs, I would use all offense because there's some games there'd be stretches, month stretches at a time where I'd use like only offensive teams because offense was really good, right? And then there'd be times where I was really comfortable using like disgustingly fat teams, like Milotic, Claydol, Dugtrio, Blissey, Skarm, Fortress, like really, really nasty do nothing teams. And that just relied completely on like Dugtrio and stalling out and switching and doubling and getting spikes up. And yeah, it was just what I thought was good at the time.
So
And
what I'm
I
getting from you the
yeah.
most, and this is unique to anybody else that I've interviewed, nobody else has expressed the same sentiment. So for you, rather than any particular opponent or somebody's preferences or whatever, the most important thing for you is to beat the meta game, is to beat the way that you perceive this is what's popular in ADV right now. That's what you've always tried to target.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I've tried to target. Yeah. And it's yeah. I think that's gonna produce, it's a 9 game, like it's such a small sample size, but I think that's gonna produce a winning record more often than not. Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit earlier. You came into ADV at kind of a middling time. You're not a new player by any means, but you're also not an old player. I mean, like I said, you weren't around in like net battle days or even Pokemon Online days. So that kind of gives a unique perspective because I've talked to both ends of the extreme where the old guys kind of see it one way, the younger guys kind of see it a different way. In your estimation, when you look at the modern tournament ADV player, the guys who are playing ADV and SPL right now, how do you think the newer crowd compares skill set wise to the older guys who were playing during the golden era, say the early to mid 2010s, where ADV was a huge deal in SPL?
Hmm. I don't know. I don't think. Let me think about that for a second.
I guess another way to add on to that question is like Dexet in his prime, do you think he puts up numbers today? And vice versa. Someone like SEA who is playing in SPL today, you think SEA would be successful back in 2015. How do you think it compares?
Yeah, I think it's Pokemon. If you're a smart person and you put in the work, you're gonna get good results. But I do think the peak of ADV was kind of when I was playing the most and when I was at my peak, because that's when older players were kind of on their way out, but newer players were coming to prominence. I think that was the most relevant time in ADV history up until uh, that point. But obviously, like people like SEA and Ban Mana and who's another new player that might be good. Um, like Behe, I guess. Yeah, they'll do well. They'll do well anywhere. They're smart people, good players. They uh, what's that guy's name? The Brazilian who's really good. Um,
Gotta give me something
I like him.
old or new. Tama,
New.
Elodin,
No,
Dexa.
the really new guy. The really new guy.
God, I'm out of the loop. There's a new good Brazilian.
His name's like Frugazi or something. Frugazi.
Oh, okay. He's a few years old. Yeah, yeah. Fradazi at this point. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good. That guy's good. I think he's a good player. But guys like that will do. Guys, people like that will do well anywhere. But I do think because of the access to information and the ease of getting games and the number of people to play against and just the spectrum of information and opportunity gives people of the newer era a really big advantage. Like it's unquantifiable, undescribable, but it's definitely there.
So here's my take on this topic, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree. I think that the average tournament player, so I would say like the top 200 ADV players, are better today than they were back then for the exact same reason that you just said. I think there's more depth. I think that whoever the 150th best ADV player is right now is better than whoever it was back then. However, at the top end, I don't think it's necessarily better today, and I'm certainly not trying to crap on new players. I don't know that today we have SPLs with like Prime, Undisputed, Dexa, Ojama, BKC, Asta. Those guys, that's the ADV pool back then. And I look at the pools today, the players are good without a doubt. I don't know that they're at that level of what I just described.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely gonna push back on that, but because I think I have like a more sour view of Dexay. Like he's a really creative player, but I was never really
Sure,
like he never really put up like the
take
stellar records.
take him out of it
Like he had
then. But BKC, Asta, Ojama, you, those kind of players. McMegan, that was the
mm,
SPL back then.
yeah, I guess the names aren't as big, but the quality's still there. I mean, these people like yeah, the quality's still there. I wouldn't be too bullish on it. I think it's just the name's not there, the face value's not there, which is important because people care about that. But yeah, it's interesting.
But you think
I think
the skill isn't
I guess
necessarily worse, just the name recognition isn't the same?
yeah, and maybe the with the name recognition comes like some of the personal brand, right? Like if you were playing, I don't know, if you were playing BKC, you knew where you were going to play like a solid Scar Mag team. If you were playing Asta, you knew you were going to play um, maybe like a longer form anti spikes team. If you were playing Ojama, you were going to be playing like an anti spikes team. Um, I don't know if any of these newer players have like personal brands, which is probably good. You shouldn't want to be associated with
I was
like
gonna say, as a counter argument to
a
that,
certain
that
style.
they're more diverse, perhaps.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. You don't want to be associated with like a certain style or one style, which I think a lot of players from the era that you're alluding to were.
Now, do you agree with the other part of the point that the average player is better today because of the all the resources and the access to information?
Oh yeah, certainly, without a doubt. You can't even compare like it's literally an incomparable,
Because like
which
back
is like
Back then,
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
good.
used to. I'm not as good as any of you guys that we've been talking about. I used to crush side tours back in the day because the first, 3, 4 rounds was just against Joe Blow, who had no clue what they were doing. You just load up something solid and play well. It's not very hard to win. But these days, just in a side tour in ADVPL or ROAPL or whatever, any kind of side tour, you might play 6 rounds against all opponents who are competent, against every single opponent who's 16, 1700 plus on ladder, and maybe they aren't a world beater, maybe they don't belong in Callas Invitational, but like this guy doesn't suck, and that was not the case back then.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really important distinction to make, and it's true. It's definitely true. I agree with you on that. Um, I think it's just hard to compare across eras because, like you said, a lot of the guys that you talked to for this cited motivation, and I know a lot of these guys when I played them would claim that they were less motivated, which is yeah, that's a fine claim to make.
So, what about a cultural shift? How do you feel the culture of the ADV community as a whole and of Smogon has changed from, like I said, mid to late 2010s through to today?
Mm. I think I don't know. I'm not that integrated in it today. I just kind of play my games and leave. I guess mid 2010s, people were very boisterous. People were very proud. Um, and nowadays, it kind of seems like people just play their games, leave, and like go to their like friend groups and just talk shit, which is fine. Like that's understandable. I can understand why you wouldn't want to like um, get into arguments with people online about who's better at Pokemon, but you know, uh, why not, right? As I was saying before, that's it's not the worst thing in the world. It's kind of, to me at least, it's a little appealing. Um, I think that's like one of the main cultural shifts that I'd cite. Uh,
Do you Am I to take from that then? Do you feel that Smogon today has less interpersonal drama than it did at that time?
at least on the surface, yeah. At least on the surface, which like someone might say, "Oh, that means that you're saying that it has less personality." Like, not really. I'm just saying it's like just different. It's just different, and I'm less involved. But
Do you think a new player trying to get into the ADV tournament scene, do you think it was a friendlier place to get into then or now?
ooh, that's a good question. I think probably then because back then you you had fewer people, so someone was just like mathematically someone's less likely to be an asshole if there's fewer people, right? Um, there's more people now, so it's probably you're probably gonna rub someone the wrong way, or I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I was a little abrasive, um, but there's also a lot of resources now, so you can kind of become good on your own. Whereas I had to like pester people for teams or try to come up with what was good by like going through forums and the outdated samples and dragging through all the weird sample teams and outdated bullshit from 2013 and 2012. Whereas nowadays, like you have access to so many good teams. It's really hard not to be like halfway decent. At least in my opinion. But I could be wrong.
So throughout your career, whether it's SPL, Callas Invitational, whatever the case may be, you played against all the top dogs at some point. Is there anybody who comes to your mind as someone that you really enjoyed playing against? And conversely, is there somebody that you really didn't like playing against for whatever reason?
Hmm. I think someone who I really enjoyed playing against was Linear. Because we practiced a lot. Like at this point in our lives, we just spent so much time playing Pokemon with one another, and many people would have considered us the two best ADVers for like a year or two. So I thought that was really cool, and just going against him on the big stage was always something I'd look forward to. Uh, at least after we'd practiced for so long and become really decent. Um, yeah, I just could not wait to play that guy. Any good player, I was really looking forward to playing. Someone who I wasn't looking forward to playing. I really hated playing the old guys like Golden Sun and Vil, and would be another guy like that.
God,
Golden Sun's Vil.
somebody that old, net era. I don't know, M Dragon, Jabba, like those are old, right?
Yeah, yeah, guys like that. I didn't like playing them because I thought they just had a disposition like against Pokemon, and they wouldn't bring like a metagame, like a team that was in meta, and I'd have like a bad matchup, and then they wouldn't like perceive a play that I would perceive, and I'd get pissed off, and I was just worried about that, you know. And I didn't. I also hated the idea of like losing to someone that was like 50 billion years old. You know, when I was like these guys had like whole ass jobs and lives, and I was just like fucking in school. Like I'd be an asshole if I lost, you know.
Is
So
there
I hated those games.
among those top guys, those staples, is there anybody that you have a losing record against that you just consistently struggled against for whatever reason?
Oh yeah, BKC always kicked my ass. Just like everything. Uh, I remember when I was playing like Pokemon Perfect and side tours, he played them too, and it would always be like us in the finals or the semifinals. And he beat me every single finals or semifinals of like ROA Olympics or ROA this tour, ROA blah blah blah, or Pokemon Perfect blah blah blah. And he'd always beat me, and it just always pissed me off because I could never beat him. And I remember there was one day where I beat Linear in SPL, and then I like destroyed him in like an ADV tour, and I just felt like really really good with my ADV. I was like, okay, you know, maybe I finally done it. I finally become like that guy in ADV. So that felt really good because he always had my number. He was just such a solid player. You couldn't get anything by him. Um, and he always brought good teams. And yeah, you knew what you were gonna get. So few mistakes. Uh, yeah, he was just a really shrewd player. So probably just did not like playing against him. I think he's the only like top guy. Him, Star, Star. I'm probably even with at this point. ABR I'm probably even with, even though he beat me in like a really big set. Um, I think BKC is someone who I have like just a horrid record against, which sucks. But what are you gonna do?
So as far as changes over the years, I don't have to go as far back with you because I mean you weren't around in net battle times or whatever, but you've still seen quite a few. I mean, I'd like to get your personal take on some of the changes that have happened to ADV since you've been around. For example, we'll go one at a time since there are quite a few of them. Do you agree with the Sandvale ban?
Yeah, I think it was fine. I think Cacturn was actually really healthy for the metagame and made spinners a lot less oppressive and made spikes like very balanced because you're using a fucking Cacturn and you know you can maybe gravitate towards more offensive like style of spikes and not have to like sap up all your momentum with Skarmory and like just try to roll the dice that like taunt or thief works. But I thought Catherine was fine, but then watching that one Callas Invitational where Gligar was just the most prominent Pokemon was disgusting. It was
CI4
so
for those of you who want to go
yes,
back.
CI4. It was just ridiculous. Like every game, it would just be a Gligar sweeping like a Swampert, a Salamence, and like an Aerodactyl, just because like you couldn't touch it. It was ridiculous. Um, yeah, that was so foul. So I think Sandville deserved to be banned, um, which sucks because Cacturn was a really, I guess it was kind of a precursor to like Roselia, which maybe I should try using. But
Well, are you open
yeah,
to complex bans? For example, if they had proposed, why don't we just ban Sandvale plus boosting moves? Would that have been acceptable to you, or do you dislike
mm,
complex bans?
I think they're fine. I really see no problem with them. I think people have put too much stock into the sacredity of Smogon tiering policy. You know, I was on the ADV council. Granted, at this point, like I was on the ADV council when I like was getting out of ADV, but I think I tried to push for some form of complex bands, but people just didn't really have it. Or they not that they didn't have it, they just couldn't do it, which sucks. But yeah, I think that'd be fine.
But if it were
I would be
solely up
open
to
to that.
you, you'd be open to either boosting plus veil isn't allowed or substitute plus
Yeah,
veil isn't
I think
allowed, something to that effect.
boosting plus veil is fine. Probably, yeah, boosting plus veil is fine.
So you've seen
That
baton
wouldn't
pass
be bad.
changes as well. You were around towards the beginning of your career when it was hog wild, when ingrained smear
Mm-hmm.
goal was allowed, when you could go full on five pass with one recipient in the back, just full on proper baton pass chains back in the day. I guess
Yeah.
starting there with the most extreme, do you think something needed to be done about that, or was that whole thing overblown?
No, that was definitely not overblown. I also didn't ladder as much. I know that made I like laddered like I would ladder, but I wouldn't ladder as much as like the ladder guys. So I don't think I could have ever been. I don't think I ever qualified as being a ladder player. Um, but it definitely wasn't overblown. That shit was broken, and I would ban everything but dry pass. That's what I would do. But people, I don't think would go for that. Uh, and I was a player who like when that shit was good, I had built so, or there was a point where I built so many teams with like around SD Pass or around Calm Mind Pass that were like semi pass. They were still like playable teams, but I just spammed the fuck out of those teams because they were just so good and so effective and easy to use. And yeah, that's definitely like I don't know. It felt cheap though using them. I'm not gonna lie. It did feel a little cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
won't even ask you about ingrained Smeargle or whatever. You obviously think that should be banned, but you would ban boosting and baton pass. Period. You think even the bans of today are not far enough.
yeah. That is exactly what I believe.
So what about would you ban, for example, on principle, evasion clause? Would you ban bright powder if it were up to you?
Yeah, I think all that shit has no place, and I think you did it the right way. It has no place in a legitimate competitive environment.
Would you ban quick
Although it can
lock?
be fun. Yeah, quick lock can probably go. It's pretty stupid.
Do you think the
I don't
community?
think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think being more restrictive is gonna. I kind of have like a paradoxical view on this. I think competitiveness is like a weird asymptote that like Smogon doesn't really define, which is kind of annoying. But at the same time, I think being more restrictive is always good because that's just gonna like that's how you get more I don't want to use the word hegemonic but like straightforward play. And if but I just don't know if that's what constitutes a competitive metagame. I think competitive is such a nonsense term that people like can't really define one, and two, um I think is paradoxical to the entire concept of Pokemon because I think Pokemon's like meant to be kind of like a fun, casual game that we've warped into being what it is. You know?
But you draw the line not quite as extreme as like Jabba, who wants Jabba wants to remove critical hits. I mean, you think that like
Yeah, that's part of the game. That's
right,
part of the game.
or like rock slide flinching, for example. You don't patch it out so it doesn't flinch anymore.
No, never, 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 never.
Do you agree overall with the way that the community approaches bans? Do you think we're too quick to ban? Do you think our process works?
Uh, I don't know. I I think ADV. A lot of people like it a lot. Um, I think what drew me away from it was that people kind of just used or yeah, just people started spamming other people's teams, and that was annoying, and kind of stopped using their own shit. Um, and yeah, people would just bring the same annoying teams all over and over again that just like weren't fun to play. And like the ABR Mistrivas team, like yeah, that's just a complete fish of a team. Some matchups are just like auto loss, but then some matchups are auto win, and then yeah, there were teams like that that just like I remember I was trying to come back into ADV at some point, or I looked at ADV and it was just shit like that, and then like yeah, just a lot of like mindless spikes teams. Not any of like the cool offensive teams, like mixed offenses. And granted, like those, maybe those teams aren't good anymore, but I wasn't seeing any of that. I wasn't seeing like any innovation that wasn't centered around just using spikes and like switching around, stalling your opponent out. But I was just like, eh. I was pretty upset about that. But yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned
I
moving
think
away from ADV. I mean, you played some DPP and SPL. You played Black White. I know that you played New Gens. You were on an RBY kick for a while. Do you still consider yourself an ADV main? And what made you, after all those years of success in SPL with ADV, what made you be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna play Black White this year, or whatever the case may be, something other than ADV?
yeah. Um, I think I just wanted to try something else. I think, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I thought I'd mastered ADV, and I truly did. And I just wanted to try something else. I wanted something fresh and something that I could put my philosophy of Pokemon into. Or I just wanted another vessel to like put my philosophy of Pokemon into. Like I'm not good enough as someone. I'm not as good as someone like ABR or Roro that can do that simultaneously across like 6 different tiers. But I could do it for like one tier or 2 tiers at a time, which I was fine with. And I just like doing that. And ADV just stopped being appealing to me. And like I felt like I'd squeezed all the juice out of it. You know,
Is ADV your strongest tier as far as you're concerned?
probably not. Probably like probably DPP or a new gen.
You think you're better at
Eh,
those than you are at ADV?
yeah, probably a new gen. I think I'm pretty even at most. I'm pretty like solid at most tiers. I'm very out of practice and advanced.
And then you play RBY as well, right? Or is that also in the past at this point?
I love the tier, but it's kind of in the past, yeah.
So here's
Which
the
is yeah, unfortunate, you know.
so here's the big question. This is the one I look forward to in every one of these interviews. Could you first define your personal criteria for what constitutes the greatest ADVer? And then obviously the big follow-up question is who is it as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, so I think the criteria is just someone who can pick up the game after however many years or irregardless of time and just win a game, you know, gun to their head, like fate of the universe on the line, just beat someone else. I think that's what constitutes the best ADVer. And I think that's got to be linear ABR by all measures. I think those two guys have just shown time and time again that they won't be stopped. And if there is an ADV competition going on that they're participating in, they're going to be among the favorites. And then there's like guys in the tier beneath that, like undisputed guy who kind of took me under his wing and nurtured me. Um, I think it's talking about changes earlier when he like put 252 special attack EVs on Swampert. That kind of changed everything. That was ridiculous. That was versus UD in SPL um, 9. If anyone wants to watch that replay, that was like the first offensive focus punch Swampert, and it just now it's such a staple of a set. So that was really cool to see. That's the guys like that and Fakes and Roro. Um, I'd put those two guys in the first tier, two that I mentioned, And then the two guys in the second tier, probably Roro above them. And then guys like myself, Star, Fakes, Undisputed, BKC, Asta, in the tier behind that. Um, I guess I'm also taking into account like team building prowess. I think because that goes along with like adapting to the metagame and just learning the metagame and becoming a competent player. And then being able to play that one game with the universe online. Yeah, I'd say those are the two best players ever in ADV, and
And the
after that,
one
it
that
kind
you
of
would pick, since you gave me two names, if you absolutely had to pick one tiny little paperclip edge, who do you give it to?
yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think ABR is like he just really has. I know I earlier said there was like no innate talent for Pokemon, but he is just very good at this game.
I'll phrase it a
Um,
different way. Let's say Linear had to play against ABR in a best of 15, both in their prime, and the winner got something huge, got $100,000. They were super motivated.
mm,
Who do you wager on to win that match?
if that's the case, I'm taking myself.
No, no, you're not part of it. It's Linear
I'm
against
not part of
ABR.
this.
Linear against
Yeah,
ABR, best of
I'll
15.
probably, yeah, I'll probably put Linear. He just, yeah, I'll probably put Linear. Best of 15. I'll take Linear. You can't bet against him. Like, yeah, it was what he did in the Callas Invitational was just ridiculous. Like that should not have been possible, you know. But he did it, and I'll take him to beat anyone.
Do you know what his
Probably,
do
I'm
you know what his
sure.
do you know what his record was all time in Callas Invitational? This sounds like a fantasy number. This sounds
Probably
not
like 30 and 10 or so, 30 and 5 or something.
29-7, which
Yeah,
is
20. Yeah, that's
and
ridiculous.
that's in four tournaments, by the way.
Yeah, that's not real.
Right. That feels like it shouldn't even be possible.
Yeah, and he's the best ever. Um, but
So I'll give you one opportunity here to not be modest if you would like. Are you, Marco, are you a top 10 ADV player of all time?
I mean, hey, I got a winning record versus that guy. But yeah, I think I am. I think I am. I don't know. Yeah, I think I am. I think if I had to, yeah, at my peak, I was the second best, but I was kind of like, um, I was all. I don't want to say I was in linear shadow because I don't want to be fucking dramatic, but he was always the best, and I was always kind of like the number two guy, uh, when I was playing, which was like, yeah, that's a good guy to be second behind, but yeah, that's how it was, and um, yeah, I'd say I'm top 10. I don't know if many people would agree with me, but I'd put myself there.
So what's left? I mean, you're still a younger guy. You could stick with this for a good while if you wanted to. What does the future hold for you in Pokemon and otherwise? What goals do you still have? How much longer do you see yourself sticking around?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I really don't know. I think Pokemon wise, I like playing with my friends. Hmm. I like playing team tours with my friends, and I like playing invitational tournaments from time to time, and just like picking up a team and playing versus a good player. I think that's like a good. That's like hard and challenging, but it's also really fun. Uh, I like that personally. Just regular like stuff. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I'm not trying to become the next Jeff Bezos. Just want to continue to work on myself personally and professionally, maintain good relationships with people, and yeah, easy enough. Continue to have good hobbies, like enjoy my youth. I think that's really important. I don't want to stress myself out too much. Enjoy my youth, and um, hopefully, eventually, start a family and all that nonsense. That would be nice, but hard to say.
This time in 3 years, are you in SPL?
3 years? Uh, Probably not. I didn't sign up for. Or I deleted my sign up for like the Smogon Champions League, which is like the
Yeah,
lower tier tournament.
SCL. It used to be the Snake Tour, right?
Yeah, it used to be Snake.
Yeah.
I deleted my sign up for that, which like you know sucked. I didn't really want to do that, but I did. So I don't know. I think I just don't have as much time as I once did, which sucks because this game's so fun and the people are cool. But yeah, that's just how life goes, you know. You yeah, it's not like I don't know what I'm doing, you know. You make time for other things. Um, I'm sure that's been a I'm sure that's been a common sentiment among all the interviewees.
Yeah, for as old and busy as all these people are. I'm older, other than with Java, so I get it.
Yeah,
Believe me. So yeah,
yeah,
that just about wraps us up. Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know before we call it an interview?
yeah. I just want to thank Callas
Oh,
for cultivating a lot of my interest in ADV. I think the Callas Invitational YouTube channel and Discord was always like a safe haven for a lot of people, and it was cool to watch yourself play on YouTube. You didn't know like if you were playing like a random ADV game, you know, maybe Callas was recording it, and then you could watch like yourself play. And you invited me on to the Invitational before I was an established player, or like super established player, and that was really cool. Yeah, you did a lot for ADV, and obviously, when uh, they tried to push you out of managing SPL, a lot of people stood up for you, like rightfully so, because you've done so much for this game, which was awesome. And yeah, I think you should definitely, yeah, I'm giving you your flowers here, man. Like what you deserve, you know.
no, I appreciate you saying it, man. That's a very nice thing to say. This interview is about you, not about me, but it obviously feels fantastic to hear that. And the fact that all of these really, really good players are willing to sit down for an hour, in this case, hour and a half, to just to talk with little old me with 1,000 subs. It's awesome. I think it speaks to the bonds in this community and the mutual respect that we have for each other. People who have impacted the game, in your case as a player, in my case maybe more as a host or a content creator. But I think we've both been a big part of ADV history, and it's really awesome that you and I have been friends for almost a decade and clearly respect what the other one has done to the game. It feels great to hear. It's mutual love, man.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. I'm not in my head. You can't see it, but I'm not in my head over here.
I have
And
been too.
yeah,
I have been too. I appreciate you being here, Marco. One of the longer interviews, a great interview. You had a lot of great insight there. Thank you so much for your time today.
oh, thank you, man. Have a great day.